Hello and welcome to yet another episode of The Extreme Exchange. This is the third season, third episode, where I talk to Xavier and Tim, who are my friends from BMT. In this episode, we talk about literature, specifically the role of literature in society, why it's even taught in schools, and what value it adds to our lives in the first place. I found it to be a very interesting conversation, and I hope you do too. Enjoy.
From past experience, literature is because it's what separates literature from just reading class is that literature is an active form of reading and deriving meaning from pieces of work of media. Doesn't matter if it's written, verbal, or audio, or an artist form. It's a form of deriving meaning from creation of our own creations.
Interpretation. Right?
Interpreting. It's a process of interpreting, I guess.
Similar for you.
I do think, it's the sense of almost semiotics, right? Like you're able to derive this meaning more than the words on the page itself. You can construct a meaning from what's being written then, as opposed to like pure description or non-fiction, something like that. And also the ability to evoke a human response.
Right. Science seems to be a bit more of a emotionless field. Literature has a human touch aspect to it, right?
Because it's our creation that we can perceive. If we can create different worlds with just the power of our mind.
And if God can create beings with purpose, and man can create words with purpose. Damn, somebody quote me on that. Okay, but okay, so on that note, do you guys see any value in the study of literature? Yeah.
I used to think no, honestly. Like my secondary school brain hated that stuff.
What do you do with a
But
BA
like-
in English?
I'm not even kidding. As like the years progress, like I can't find myself enjoying reading more and more.
I share the same sentiment too. I was so confused how literature was even an examinable subject. I was like, what even is
It
this?
shouldn't be,
Yeah.
but I think it's more of the fact that the skills required for literature
Sec 4 me thought it was all
should be
bullshit.
tested.
Like it was a scam where interpretations
It's
were
like
made up
the
for the sake
water
of
was
examinations.
blue. The water was blue. It's a reflection of his internal.
The
his
meme,
internal
right?
machinations
I
and
genuinely
it's
thought it
rubbish.
was all bullshit. Up until about Sec 3.
I mean, to a certain extent, it kind of still is bullshit, And it's kind of a little crap.
Yeah. On that note, it's a point on like maybe the pitfalls of literature. Maybe like you could, if it's corrupt, you could end up assigning meaning to text that isn't actually there, and then you just be like, I don't know.
But I think the value of literature is in the endless permutations of the meaning that can be derived from it, right?
It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
Like, cliched example, but the ability to transpose Shakespeare to an infinite number of circumstances, or the ability to the ability for literary critics in countless generations to come up with novel insights into literary texts. Like I don't know, people are constantly coming up with interpretations like Don Quixote or Thousand Years of Solitude.
Yeah.
Okay, but does it mean you're of the view that there's no such thing as a right interpretation?
I think there's author's intention.
There's the author's intention versus the intention derived from the readers.
But I don't think
So two different things.
author's
Okay.
intention is necessarily synonymous with the right interpretation.
Yes, because the author's interpretation
Oh,
is
wow.
simply a
Because-
product of his own interpretation. I read about this recently.
And this
also.
goes back to rationalism, right? I think, like math, in literature, you're dealing with abstract concepts that transcend the literal or transcend the physical. And once you do that, there's no such thing as ownership, right? Once you introduce a
objective.
concept that transcends the literal and the physical, the author's intention is no longer relevant because it's the interpretation of the concept that can be individualistic to the reader or the context or the time.
Okay, well, actually, that's
But ultimately, I would say that you should look at the author's interpretation because you can glean insight into it. That's the whole point of people reading into the biography of authors and their life experiences and how it influenced their work, because they want to see why they've written their work in such a way and how they justify their experiences or show their insights into what they think is right and wrong through the forms of literature
I mean,
that they create.
the analogy is. I'm trying to think of an invention that's not used for its original purpose. And the only thing I can think of is a politically insensitive Family Guy meme that we won't
What was
raise.
it? What was it?
Henry Ford and the Jew flattening machine. I'm trying to think of a
What
real
is it?
example.
What's the difference?
No, the Family Guy joke was that Henry Ford was a Nazi sympathizer.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, he was,
So
he was.
the implicit joke in Family Guy was that Henry Ford invented it to be a Jew flattening
bulldozer.
machine, and then someone's like, "Hey, you could also drive a car." Then he's like, "Hey, you could also drive around in it." Then he's like, "Yeah, you could, but you could also use the Mona Lisa as a placemat."
Okay, that's the thing though. I don't know. Okay, it's a very small tangent, but during my TOK presentation, I worked on the KQ. What is art? So I explored.
Oh, you did question 4.
Yeah. No, not the essay, the presentation.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
presentation.
Oh.
So my question was what is art, and so I had to give like different reasons as to what constitutes art and why that's wrong and whatnot. And I came all the way down to the final like conclusion, which is that what constitutes art is if the creator intended it to be art.
So
That's-
you think
yeah.
only author's intention exists?
For me, author's intention is one of the most, if not the only right way to interpret something.
Then why would you consider things in nature to be very artistic, pure beauty?
Oh, but okay,
But you can
then
keep
I mean you could always
meaning from
just
those.
point it at
God
God.
is the
Yeah,
author.
correct. But yeah.
Without God in the equation, what would you say is the reason? Unless you're saying that God is the reason, then
No lah, but wow, okay. Wow, I feel we're actually going back to the previous one, but yeah, I don't want to dwell too much on this. It could just be that if there is no creator for nature, then there is no right. And I have to stress that it's right interpretation, not
But
any
okay,
interpretation.
say you could come up with equally valid but different interpretations of a piece of literature,
Mm-hmm. No,
and
but
you didn't know the author's intention. But both of them were meaningful. Both of them brought novel insights into human nature, and both of them were talking about society in some way or another. Even if, say, for some reason, the author's intention was obscured obscured to the annals of history, and you'd never be able to find it out. But you could derive value from the two separate interpretations.
right, then I would think that the
As a thought
interpretation that
experiment.
the interpretation that wasn't intended by the author is a serendipitous one. As in, it's one that was unintended but had good.
But I don't think that's the thing. I don't think it's just serendipity. Of course, there are a lot of like bullshit interpretations, right? But I do think there will be multiple interpretations to anything. We live in a pluralistic
Oh,
world,
yeah, I mean,
right? And you
I'm
can
not-
view things with
Yeah.
different lenses.
I'm not disputing that. I'm disputing the rightness of the interpretation. Yeah,
Brightness.
yeah.
But does it matter if it's right in the fact that it gleams insight into certain methods of thinking? Because no matter how right or wrong it is, there's something that influenced the person to think that way, and that itself is an insightful in nature.
Because you don't have ownership over an
Correct.
idea, right? They're metaphysical constructs.
It's like even if how do I put it, Hitler gleaned the wrong meaning from his influences and then created his whole Nazi ideology, we can understand, we can condemn it as wrong, but at the same time we can also learn from why he thought that way and his interpretation, what were his ideas of interpretation that led to the creation of these twisted ideals, and that itself is value no matter how reprehensible the idea itself is, because the process of how it was formed from his interpretation of literature, that process itself has value.
So bad interpretations are still useful.
when you perceive it as bad, then you need to find out what made it bad and what made the person create it in the first place. Then you can come up with the most um, the most practicable use of that knowledge. Because you understand the opposite point of view rather than simply trying to confine his ideas into your own specific worldview. So I'll say it's like the most important part of this whole right wrong interpretation thing.
Okay. So it's like here we're prioritizing benefit to society in some sense, whether it's knowledge or insight wise.
I mean, that's why we study history, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because yeah, I guess in that case, my concept of a right interpretation was more of a correct interpretation rather than useful or meaningful or valuable interpretation. Yeah. So, okay, I stand corrected on what a right interpretation is.
I mean, I do think there can be an intended
It
interpretation.
can be intended.
I just don't think it's synonymous with a right interpretation because I don't think it exists.
Because ultimately, what you think is right can be my wrong, you know. And that, you know,
What
whole line
the
of
author
thought.
thinks is
Yes.
right may not necessarily be how he portrayed it, right?
It's a delivery
Like,
problem.
because think
Yeah.
about what you're doing when you're crafting literature, right?
You're using
You can
analogies
use
and
certain things
stories.
to influence how something is perceived, right? You can use literary devices, you can use metaphors, you can use similes, you can use imagery, all of this semantics to influence how the audience perceives something. But there's no guarantee of outcome, right?
Some of a gamble, right?
These are all tools to influence how the audience perceives it, but ultimately it's individualistic. And you can't say that how someone perceives it is wrong because these things are objective, right? They're words on a piece of paper. And the author might try to influence you how you experience something he's chronicling through this use of literary devices. But ultimately, any perception is valid because they do have that perception, right?
You're constrained by the fact that you want to impose your own beliefs,
Yeah.
to craft your own narrative. I think that's the nature of most postmodern literature anyways. They try and deconstruct the nature of how people love to ascribe meaning to books, and then they try and turn it back onto you and tell you that, you know, why are you doing this. I think one book that I've read recently about this, I mean, it's literature, so like it's about I think it's Thomas Pynchon's Cry of Lot 49. It's quite an interesting book. It's about this woman who finds out about Lot 49, about this secret society. She spends a whole month attempting to discern the meaning of things, searching for ideas and allusions behind random symbols in places that she's been to. And at the end, it's unclear whether she's found it, and there's no answer given to the reader that she's found out about the existence of a secret society, or whether she's just deluding herself. And that's the point of it, you know. But even then, the irony is that interpretation itself, you know.
Oh, it's like it speaks about you trying to interpret.
Yes, exactly. It's very cyclical in that sense. That itself, what I'm saying, was also an interpretation, which is like the funny part of the whole book itself. You're just caught in that process of, you know, of interpretation.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah, because it's almost like you have as with anything, the author has no ownership over outcome.
Correct.
There can't be a guaranteed outcome. Same with history, right? It's like things happen and then words are put on a page in a certain sequence and they're there. But there's no way to say for sure what the outcome of that is. So, like, you know, as with history, there's all kinds of revisionisms, right? You can go back and completely flip the table, and Marxists can say, oh, actually, this was quite a good example of a communist utopia. And then capitalists can go, oh, no, but it was entrepreneurial, and there was capital forming and all of that, right? And same thing with literature, right? the author can try and slant it in a certain direction, but it's just words. These things are just constructs, and you can find evidence for the contrary. As much as the author would like you to believe something.
Revisionists can always claim that Mao's regime was beneficial, and there'll be 1,001 reasons that say that's not true, and there'll be 1,001 reasons to say that's the case.
Right.
And I think that's the difficulty, and I guess that's the beauty of it,
Okay, so in that case, right, it does seem like a very wishy-washy kind of.
Because it's so hard to ascribe a fixed,
Yeah.
stable idea to it, right?
Yeah, I mean it stands in contrast to science because science is very hard facts. I mean, yes, you could dispute data analysis and whatever, but the fact of the matter is we're observing things, we're looking
And now we know why literature majors struggle to find employment.
yeah, but okay, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to wrap this up with the final question about what value does it add to society? Because you could say that if at the end of the day everything is interpretation, and it's just my view against yours, then why even bother teaching this to people? I mean, yeah, it just seems to, or not teaching this to people, but what use does it have in society? Like economics is useful, science is useful, math is useful, but literature, I mean,
You engage people in the process of thought itself, because when you teach them how to think, how people create different forms of persuasion, you help people perceive the world, and then from their own point of view and their own beliefs and personality, they can form their own perception of the world itself. You are teaching people to construct the world from their environment, and not just be a passive actor. That's what I would say from it. You're not so more passive as now you are an active person engaging with the world and its creations.
Actually, interestingly, I still think literature has very little tangible value to society. But I do think that the reason why it's important is not because of its tangible impacts on society. Because I do think trying to link that would be a bit tenuous, and it's difficult to say, oh, we have a more informed and cognizant society when people read books. But it's more because it's almost as if art for the sake of art, right? Like Oscar Wilde's whole concept, where whether for some aesthetic ideal or something, as a human race, we find value in maintaining what we find beautiful, and we find, is able to describe the sublime, even though it doesn't have, or what our perceptions are of the sublime, even if these musings have very little tangible benefit on society.
So it's like a leisure hobby rather than a necessity.
I don't think it's leisure. I mean, it even boils down to why have philosophy, right? It's the ability to have an exposition for these ideas, even if the ideas in and of themselves don't bring tangible benefits. That exploration of these ideas in and of itself is valuable to have.
And help you construct the way you live and how you affect other people,
Right.
And it's almost, again, I don't want to go back to it, but this idea of rationalism, right? It's, I exist, I think, therefore I am. It's a reason behind living, right? If not, no. We don't want to just be automatons living and building buildings and making money and crunching numbers and planning conducts. But there has to be a reason to live, right? If not, what distinguishes us from animals is the ability to perceive what we think is the sublime, the ability for us to posit what we think is transcendental and what makes us more than just a sum of our raw animal instincts and chemical coercion.
think that's well said. Alright. If there is nothing much else, I think that is a fitting place to end our second theme. Yeah. And I just want to say thanks for taking the time to come here today on a Thursday evening. It's quite late.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
No problem. I hope it was as fruitful of a discussion as it was for you, as it was for me. Yeah, I find value in these because when you talk things out, you discover things that were in you that you didn't know you knew. Yeah. And for anyone who somehow stuck to the very end of this video for some reason, thanks also for following through. And I will see everyone in the next episode of the Extreme Exchange. Bye! Say bye-bye.